Hello and welcome to the Six Sales podcast. My name's Mike Nicholson from Six Sales. Today I'm going to be speaking to Bill Swanson. But before we do, just a quick thank you to Lumen Research, the sponsors of the Six Sales podcast. For those that don't know, Lumen Research are an eye tracking technology company that help brands to plan, buy, measure and optimize towards real human attention. So thank you to the team at Lumen. And Bill, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Warming up, cold out there.
Very cold out there. It's a bit warmer in this particular room, but yeah, it's Baltic, isn't it? It's not nice at all. Can't wait for the summer. So traditionally on the podcast, as you may or may not know, we like to take a little trip down memory lane and figure out how your career got to where it is to date. So maybe you could kick us off with that, please.
Yep. I think probably like most people in media, didn't start looking at media. Studied environmental management, so obviously that flowed beautifully through to a media career. And so I started off actually working at .com, just because it sounded interesting. Everything with lots of money moving there, just far more fun stuff. Obviously that went bust, as did all these things in .com bust businesses. And then, but the fact I had a little bit of digital on my CV, then helped me get to a job at News International as it was then. Looking at a bunch of different digital projects and monetization in terms of first, it's a video. I was actually looking at my CV, it said WAP on it, which for anyone probably listening to this, watching this, would not have a clue what that is. But
Wireless Application Protocol, is that
something like that? Yeah, having content on a
really
mobile
bad
phone.
Internet is like really bad internet connection.
Yeah. I don't even. It was poor 3G. God knows how it even flowed through.
And 0G.
0G, exactly, yeah. So that was a thrilling user experience, I'm sure. And then so we did a bunch of stuff there, so which is really interesting. There for about 5 years. I got headhunted to go to The Independent. Picked up a bunch of stuff there. So running their magazine business, like Miss London, if you remember those things, and a whole bunch of educational titles they had, plus their syndication business. And then was like, Bill, do you want to run our digital business, like independent.co.uk? Which at the time was, I think I was saying earlier, 2 editorial staff, 1 ad ops person, 1 sales guy. No editorial, that was it. So an interesting project, great, in terms of learning curve. Built that up over 4 or 5 years. Started experiencing interest from all the ad tech vendors knocking your door, promising you the next best thing, millions of pounds by just putting their technology onto your website. So yeah,
Super like SDK, just pop that in there.
Easy, yeah, exactly, yeah. All that white space on the left of the screen, just put an ad there, and guarantee you £1 million. Okay, go on then. Never did. But started, to early days of programmatic, when you're building these sites and you're starting to get more and more ad slots. You can't sell in the traditional way. So that for me is a massive growth area. And then to move into Programmatic. Again, Programmatic pretty early in the market in the UK. We're well behind some of the other competitors in the market. After a couple of years running the UK, then took over the EMEA business, and we grew that across Europe. So opening up offices and again, boom times, I guess, of Programmatic. A few years where the market wasn't quite so good, but generally, so the rise of digital advertising, continues to go and continues to grow, just going to more and more different verticals now, digital out of home, audio, so on and so forth. So yeah, and then so we moved from there to Telaria, which was focusing more on the video and CTV side, which for me was a massive growth area and still is. Hence some of this conversation today. Unfortunately, Telaria bought by Rubicon, became Magnite, COVID, and then was working for a company called Iris, which is around contextual and CTV and video, which again massively interesting, huge growth area, which still there. And then been the last couple of years at Kinetics, running their European business, trying to build that out in terms of video player monetization across Europe as well. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey. One that if you go back to university days, was that something I had planned and mapped out? Absolutely not.
No, I fell into it as well. I think my first job was at Courts Furnishers, which doesn't exist anymore. It was working in the head office for a buyer, and I was asked if I wanted to do some sales on a Saturday job at their Woking store. I was like, yeah, go on then. And it turns out that I could sell. And so that head office was in Morden, the end of the Northern Line, and the head office of what is now NewsQuest was in Morden. It was Read regional newspapers back at the time. I ended up going into media there, and as I say, the rest is history, as they say in the trade. So, so for those that are hiring and looking to take their business to the next step, Bill is currently, if you're, well, depending on when you're watching this, I suppose, but Bill is open for business from a consulting and a full-time point of view. So,
thank you.
If you like what you see, drop that in. If you like what you see, very, very experienced and accomplished sales leader. Yeah, I'm trying to put the nice words on it, Bill. Come on, because we're both in the same boat here. So video. So the last couple of jobs that you had, and probably with the independent as well, being in digital, video became a big and increasing part of your life. How are you looking at the video market at the moment in terms of where it is? And when I say video, at its broadest level, so that could be CTV, terrestrial TV, VOD, all of the VODs.
Everything, I think the video in it. I mean, look, it's continuing to grow, and part of the interesting, I found all through the media, world and life I've had so far is, the money's got to come from somewhere. The money comes from brands, and the brands and the money follow eyeballs. And so, for my very simple brain, it's not really rocket science. I try and think about myself, not too much, but in a sort of professional and personal capacities, like what are you doing? You're watching TV, you're looking at stuff on your phone. You're seeing more, advertising on digital out-of-home boards. You're seeing more and more type of streaming with audio with video clips in it. So the eyeballs are there, and so the video is more and more captivating. It's easier than reading, for me anyway. And so therefore, that's where the money is, or where the money should be, depending on the economic climate. And it's just a far more engaging medium. So we could just be doing this by audio. Maybe people won't find it as engaging and do it on the video side, but it does drive. It's got high engagement. Again, that's where the money is. That's where the brands want to be. Then you've got the type of walled gardens platforms who are producing a ton of content, loads of influencer content, and some of it's good, and that's taking some of the money away from some of the traditional publishers who have invested huge amounts of money, as you'll know from your Telegraph days, in terms of trying to produce quality content, which high production costs. But with technology out there, mobile phones, people can produce more and more content. And so for me, it's type of being, how do you work with technologies that can capture that on behalf of a publisher or an advertiser? And then it's sort of moving at type of how TV's changed, fast channels, just general CTV, broadcast trying to flip into that market as well, or grow their reach there. But it's all mainly driven by advertising. And so that for me is, how can you make that as good an experience as possible? Because me as a consumer, and again, everyone talks about, what do consumers think? How as a brand do they think about consumer? Well, the person who works at that brand is a consumer as well. And I think the two sometimes get distanced too much. So it's, how can you bring those more together and just make sure it's relevant and it's a good experience, and therefore from a brand perspective, they're happy to be advertising in that arena. And the last couple of companies I worked at as well, I've been looking at contextual. Contextual, I think, is key. One of the newspapers brands we were talking about earlier, which I won't mention, we're talking to them, one of the companies I worked at, in terms of contextual relevance for their video and why that's important. It was an article page on, I can't think, it was sport. First video was let's say football. Second was on rugby. Third video in the cycle was a piece of CCTV footage of someone going into a park to do something not very nice to somebody else. Now, whilst as a piece of content that's awful to watch, and from a news brand you'd expect to see that, but not on a sports page and not within a video, and definitely not what the brands are targeting when they're buying that video slot. And so from a contextual perspective, I think that's going to get more and more important.
Video plays a black box, isn't it, in terms of keyword searches and stuff like that. And
Absolutely.
brand safety, you don't really know what's going to happen after the first video play if you've got like a carousel video player.
Yeah, exactly. And then when you're looking at then type of, the streaming platforms, long form content, what might be brand safe in the first minute might be totally relevant in the second minute. And so still the type of show level information that's being passed through is okay, but you're not really getting deep into the weeds. And so therefore, for going back to the buyers, the brands, they want to make sure they're buying in a brand safe environment. And if you go back to a couple of years or so in terms of the walled gardens, a lot of it just being UGC, then how brand safe is that? You're getting huge amounts of reach and scale on behalf of the brand, but is it brand safe? And there are obviously numerous stories about the wrong advertising against the wrong kind of content. But again, those types of channels, YouTube in particular, beginning to produce more and more really good content. And so therefore, that's going to keep brand money going there and away from some of the more traditional news publishers and some of the linear TV. So that's got to be a concern for those that's in the more traditional area of the business. But the money follows the eyeballs and the quality, and therefore, for me, that's why contextual is also massively interesting in terms of how that's going to grow. And I guess the other point then is, which everyone bangs on about, is measurement. You've got measurement here in linear, you've got measurement here in terms of digital and fast and everything else. And are they going to converge? Who knows? There's a lot, it's a global issue, it's a local issue. So that'll continue to be interesting. For me, really the key thing is, is that relevant for the brand? Can the brand actually, make sure that it's targeting the right kind of content? Is the user getting a rich enough experience and the right kind of targeting in terms of that quality of advertising? And how you want to measure that really is really type of what your brand, if you're an agency, wants to hit. And trying to compare it to other type of more traditional formats, I think is quite tricky and will continue to be tricky.
Yeah. You mentioned contextual though, and I think you joked that when I was bigging you up at the beginning that you're just old. But one of the benefits I think of having people that have kind of been there and done it is contextual was basically how digital advertising started. That's all we had, and it worked really well. Like you mentioned my Telegraph days, we used to have as every newspaper website does is. You'd have verticals, so you'd have your main news, your sport, your food, your travel, fashion, etc. And then within that, we'd try to embed video content to try and engage people for longer periods of time. But there'd also be editorial, but it was all themed around the vertical that it's within. And I remember very clearly, even in the primitive days of digital advertising before Xaxis was even a twinkle in Group M's eye, if you put a Hellmann's mayonnaise advert in the food section, the click-through rate would be exponentially bigger than it would be if you just ran it run of sight. So same newspaper, same sort of editorial stance, same, you would imagine roughly the same sort of audience that would find that newspaper to their liking, but wildly different results. And I think the problem came about is when with Programmatic we started to chase the right person. So if you think of the holy trinity of the right person, the right message, the right time, we got so in the weeds with trying to find the right person because we could that we forgot about the right message and the right time. And
I totally agree.
And I've worked with at Six Sales, we work with Video Intelligence, who got bought by Outbrain, and we've worked with Nano and lots of other companies. We're working with ReadPeak at the moment, which are delivering fantastic results with native, contextually targeted native advertising. It just makes sense. If you're looking at an article about the top 10 golf clubs and you see a tight list golf club, you're more likely to pay attention to that ad than if it's a banking ad.
Yeah, and again, if you go back to just newsprint, I mean, if you want to, you're Adidas, you want to advertise to sport and tenders, go in the sports pages. Maybe go in business because people who also work in business also do sport. Or you could actually have run of paper if you wanted to, because everyone who reads the paper probably does some element of that, but you're more guaranteed in sport that person's probably going to wear a pair of Adidas trainers or whatever it may be. So to your point, I think it has got overcomplicated, and people have tried to use technology to do certain things where taking a bit of a step back and just really simplifying it somewhat rather than overcomplicating it. And when I look and speak and work with publishers, for example, it's like, how many tech partners do you need to work with? And then I think a lot of them have got to the point where we've got so many vendors who don't know how to manage them. We've got so many dashboards of all different vendors, so good luck managing all those dashboards. And even going back to my time as a publisher and showing my age here, which was like 14 years ago, I think 13 years ago when I was a publisher, it's like you go and see, everyone comes to see you and you see you, and they show you a great dashboard and you go, brilliant, if I could spend all day on that, I could really work out this bit of my business. But then I've got 10 of them, and editorial going to be doing this bit, commercial going to be doing this bit, ad ops is going to be in this bit, but they're not speaking to each other because they've got different focuses, and there's no real alignment there. And so it gets overcomplicated, I think, for people. And again, if you're trying to target, you can target too much, and therefore you just don't deliver on your campaigns. So contextual for me is, it is type of taking some of that simplification back, but allowing that targeting to happen around the type of content where the relevant eyeballs should be. But there's no guarantee that those eyeballs are all going to be the most relevant, but you've got a good chance.
You've got a much better chance, yeah, for sure. So in terms of you, let me step back. So I talk to a lot of people that are looking for their next gig, and this might just be me, in which case, me in a very small sample size, in which case I'm going to look like an idiot. But I've got a hypothesis based on the conversations I've had with people that are looking for their next gig, and that is that they react to a job description and they then trying to fit themselves into that job description. I understand that totally. I wouldn't say that that's a bad strategy, because if that's the job description and you can show you're perfect for that, then great. It's almost like contextualize targeting yourself to the job description.
So
right?
you've done there. Yeah.
See what I did there? Yeah, I'm trying to link, always trying to link. But what I would say is, I've been running Six Sales now for 6.5 years, and I ran a business before that for a couple of years. I don't think of myself as going for a job anymore. I think of myself as a service provider. But I think that people going for a job would do well to think of themselves as a service provider, because the job description came about because there's a business need. And if you can understand the business need more deeply and also more generally, and how you're going to fit into that and what skill set you have that helps to do that, you can start to identify other opportunities where they might not even be advertising yet. If you know what problems typically happen before the job description for Bill Swanson comes about, and what that looks like, you can start identifying companies that might be about to hire, for example, but they haven't yet because they're not quite there. We were talking off air that I'm at that point where I need to hire someone else, but I haven't quite got the revenue to do it yet, so we're in that sort of sweet spot. So I'm not hiring, I haven't got any job descriptions out there, but I will have at some point.
So that's stopping people phoning you now?
Don't
phone me quite yet.
So I think it makes sense to not only focus specifically on the job description, but think about yourself as an individual service provider. And of course you're doing some consulting work now, and that makes you an individual consulting service provider. But that's all that a job is, I think, essentially. So if you were to if I was going to put you on the spot then and say, so what problems do you typically see in a business that leads to them hiring you? What does that look like?
Obviously being old, I guess I'm coming in at a bit of a more senior level, which I enjoy, because you're senior to a point because you've got a bunch of miles under the belt, and you're bringing that type of industry experience. And going back to what we were discussing earlier in terms of I've never actually worked in print. I've actually never sold an advert in my life, even that's what my parents think I do. But sort of having seen that evolution of media, and go back to an earlier point, money just follows eyeballs. Yes, it's a bit more complex than that, but it's type of understanding that, and then type of how does that move forward for a publisher or for a brand, and how do they operate now, and then what do they need to be doing for the future? I haven't got a crystal ball. I can't predict how their business is actually going to evolve, but I can type of help them in terms of getting the right teams in place, or looking at what the current setup is. Do they need to type of step back to have a look at things? What are their competitor set doing? Is it the fact that they've made some bad decisions in the past and want a new set of eyes to look at things? Has someone left, in terms of just gone to something different, and they just need someone to fit that chair, but with a different type of viewpoint. So for me, it's sort of looking at opportunities where I feel I can add value, and yet to your point, there's a job spec, and you go, I can do all of that bit, but plus, what about all the other bits that I can also bring to it? And I think sometimes people are nervous that you might come in and tread on people's toes. I'm not a marketeer, but I've worked with loads of marketing teams, and I'd like to think I've contributed to marketing campaigns and ideas that we've had as businesses. And that's all part of the general mix of what I bring in experience. So, I think you're right. You are bringing a service, and businesses don't necessarily know what they're looking for. They've got a pretty good idea on certain things, but bringing in myself, other people, is in terms of it's my type of level, is you're bringing in just a wealth of experience. And a lot of it for me has been, people, US companies looking to type of navigate the EMEA marketplace. A lot of that is trying to explain that EMEA is not one country. We don't just use pounds, euro, United States of EMEA. And that's all good because there's a company who's already established over here, and you're trying to type of establish over here, or type of help the team. They tend to type of get some fairly junior people on the ground first of all, type of test the water, get some organic growth, and you need to type of help those people grow, help those businesses grow, and again nuance it for the marketplace. And so for me, as a service, it's type of bringing that experience, type of converting it to whichever type of vertical it sits in, who you're trying to target, buy side, sell side, or both, who your competitor sets. So there's a ton of things, but for me, it's really sort of looking at technologies in terms of where you think you can make a real change. Again, going back to my publishing days, everyone knocking on your door, offering you the next best thing, you've got to make sure it is something that's relevant for the market.
Okay. Well, when we were talking off air before, we were talking about taking companies to the next stage of growth, and companies can grow to a certain sort of stage and then end up hitting a bit of a ceiling and not really knowing maybe internally. Quite often the CEO might be the product guy rather than the marketing guy, or rather than the sales guy, for example. And I say guy in the American term as in everyone, not men and women. Obviously, it can be either. And you've had experience at doing that, right? So if your next hiring company is like, well, we want to go from X to Y. What sort of things do you look at in this sort of diagnostic stage leading into that, and then how does that sort of roll out without giving away all of your trade secrets, of course?
I don't know any trade secrets. I think the first thing I ever ask anybody is numbers, because if you don't understand, you can look at it from the outside and go, okay, well, everything's always shiny on the outside. That's when I'm trying to recruit you, trying to get you in at any level, and then you go in and find it's not quite as shiny, which is generally,
I've been there.
Generally the case. And then it's quite like, some of it's far more rusty than I intended or planned when I took the job, and that's again type of fine because you're there to type of fix things in most instances, or to look at those next steps in terms of how to grow. But for me, it's the numbers, and type of first off, that's what I want, because without understanding where the businesses come from,
and that's before you take the job.
If I can get them, I mean, they're not always overly happy to give them to you or anonymize them, but you can say, people, you want a job, that's fine, but you don't want to just jump into any job. And there've been a few where I've been headhunted, and then you type of get in there and it's not anything to how it's supposed to be. And so now anything I'm looking at now would be grilled very hard before I went anywhere, because I want to make sure that I'm there to be able to make a difference with a full understanding of what you're walking into, and they're not shiny. That's fine. You're there to type of solve things, grow things, build a team, whatever it may be. But any indication you have on numbers will obviously help you. And if you've got an idea of what's more concrete idea in terms of what some of the problems are, you can hit day one running, rather than spending the next 2-3 months going, well, hang on, you didn't tell me about this bit. So we're going to have to take a step back, so your plans are not going to be hit in terms of the numbers that you wish to happen.
Do you think people don't tell you the full truth because they don't want that to get out into the market, and they don't know if you're going to be the right hire yet? Or do you think it's more, if they tell you the full truth, you might be put off? Or do you think maybe a mixture of the two?
I think it's probably a mixture of the two. But I think you've got to have a budget. You've got a budget to hire someone. You want that person to stay. As everyone knows, recruiting someone's takes a long time and it's expensive. The last thing you want is that person leaving, or you've got to get rid of that person after 3 to 6 months because it wastes everyone's time. Your business hasn't progressed. So I think everyone's got to do their due diligence, and you do as much as you possibly can. But for me, I think it's type of really quizzing the board, the investors, in terms of, okay, well, look, more than happy to come and join, but tell me warts and all where we're at, and then I know that I know what I need to do. If you're not going to invest in the business for the next 6 months, that's fine. I'll get my hands dirty. We'll do what we need to do to then be able to build that plan. But I think again in the current market where lots of people are looking for jobs, you've got the risk as an employer of taking someone because they just desperately want the job, going to a point of job specs that said this, my CV says this, perfect, great. And it might be that the CV's been written in a certain way to make sure it's tailored for that, which is fine. That's what you need to do to get through.
I think that's going to be the de rigueur, isn't it, from now on with AI? I would imagine that you'll get to the point where you'll say, here's the job description, make my CV like that.
Well, I think you apply for.
That's probably already happening. Let's be honest.
Yeah, you apply for a few, bunch of jobs, and your computer says no, and it's like, well, okay, well, what? And again, people are getting even more people responding to jobs now because there are more people in the market, and so, but as a potential, type of candidate, and you're getting no feedback, and it's just no, computer says no. I don't think it looks very good for the company either. I've had a couple where I've pinged someone who I know in the company saying, oh, but just by the way, I've just pinged my details in. I've got to go through the right channels, but just so you're aware. And it comes back with a no. And you go, okay, well, so and so just said that they'll have, they'll keep an eye out. You then ping them back and they go, oh, Bill, sorry, HR missed it. When they're going through the CVs on their desk, or they're not on their desk. They're chucking them through an algorithm, and then you're just getting spat out. I think it's just, it's disappointing. I think that people aren't necessarily giving the time to look at those, and I fully appreciate that they're getting thousands of applications, but I think there's some level of feedback, and they're like, oh, just you're too expensive. Okay, fine, get it. Or but you're trying to pitch your salary because your seniority or wherever level you may sit, and if that's what the reason for being kicked out, then okay, well that's not necessarily what you're looking for. It might not just be the salary that's important. It's the type of job it is, or a different type of avenue it gives you in terms of your career. I just think it's a very, very tough market, and everyone knows that. But yeah, I think the more face-to-face, the more networking you can do, the better. I don't know if I answered your question. I don't know where we got to with that one.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So we were just looking at some of the things. So yes, in terms of we look at the numbers when we're thinking about planning for the next stage of growth. We look at the numbers, but are there specific things? Because I mean, I don't know. You've done it before, obviously, and I'm just wondering if there are specific things that you look at and plan for in order to go, okay, well, we're going to go from 10 million to 20 million in 5 years, and this is how we're going to do it. Or is it just so different from every business you can't really kind of generalise?
I think you look at the product, the service, what it brings to market, where it fits in terms of where you see the growth of where that is. Let's say type of looking at CTV or technology around. Let's just stick to contextual and CTV. At the moment, there's still a limited amount of supply that's out there that's being bought, programmatically, or there's just not a great deal of supply that's out there that is not already being sold directly. And so, from a contextual perspective, if you can do that, it's going to open up more dollars, and it's going to allow buyers to be a bit more secure in the way they're buying. And so, you can see how that's going to evolve. You can see the type of how linear is evolving and how they're growing their own channels, how money's beginning to look outside of the walled gardens, but also how more money's going to go into the walled gardens because they're producing more and more serious content, not serious content, produced content. And so you have a look at all of that and go, okay, well, you get, again, just sticking to contextual as just one sort of topic, is that's going to get more relevant, and it's going to be more relevant in different markets and around different type of genres as well. News is going to be difficult because people are nervous around advertising around news. So is sport going to get bigger? Yes, it is. Sport. Live streaming of sport. I think it's Tubi who've just done. They just done or they were doing the Super Bowl, or someone was doing Super Bowl. That's opened up a whole new ton of supply. And so you go, okay, well, these things are going to happen. Netflix is now getting advertising, Amazon's now getting advertising, so there's more money coming in there. And so you can start building out your models based on where the money's going, how technology's evolving, what users want, what other businesses need. So you can, you're this particular service, your particular product, okay, we're going to take 0.1% of the overall market or whatever it may be. And so you can start type of building that out. But I think if you go into anywhere and say, okay, look, we're going to grow 100% year on year, and that's your curve, that's just a straight line, it's unrealistic. And you've got to hire people, that takes time. The there are always going to be hurdles you need to get over. It's going to take time for technology to evolve, for the product to evolve. And so it's more of a type of stepped growth.
Yeah.
For me, when you're modeling that out, you've got to be realistic. And I think sometimes, depending on the ownership of the company, if it's PE owned, for example, it says like we want instant growth, it's got to go like this straight off, and you've got to educate and help them understand that it's just not like that. You open a business in the UK, you might have a few people on the ground there. You want to go and open in France and Germany, well, you're not French, you're not German, so that's going to take you longer. Yes, they're big markets, and you want to get there at some point in time, but you don't want to sort of stretch yourself from trying to grow the UK side of the business when that's going to take a bit of time to grow. You don't want to take resource, time, products to go and work on the French and German marketplaces because you don't have the bandwidth to do that. Yeah. And so, managing expectations. You're not going to go into a job and go, well, you're going to be flat for the next year, and you might do that once you're in because you can have a look at things and go, well, look, now you've given me all the numbers, now I've got access to that. This is I'm going to manage your expectations, and we need to take a few steps back before we're going to grow it. You're not going to say that in an interview because they don't want to hear that. But you've got to show that you've got a plan for growth, and you can talk around that plan for growth based on what you know at this point in time. But I think it's got to be very caveated in terms of this is what I know at this point in time, and this is how I'd expect it to grow. You told me you're going to invest in 5 people here. Great. It's going to take time to get them up to speed, but then we can see when they're up to speed that we're going to be at this kind of level. But yeah, it's bringing that experience, it's type of bringing in and asking the right questions so you get those answers rather than yes, I can do all of that. Yeah. And then you walk into something and it's like, well, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah, it's so hard though, isn't it, to forecast, because even if you weren't trying to get a job at that stage, and to your point, you can't tell them that everything's going to be rosy because it's unrealistic, and you can't tell them this might take for ages because they don't want to hear that either. Yeah. But even if you took that pressure away and it was just your business and you were just forecasting yourself, like just, no pressure to go too high or too low, yeah. It's incredibly difficult to do. I've found anyway, and I know a number of people, sort of other founders of businesses have found the same. I mean, the most jaw-dropping episode of the Six Sales podcast I ever did was with John Kieran, the founder of System 1. I don't know if you listened to that one. It took him 21 months to get his first client. And it's not good to be speechless on a podcast, no. But I was just trying to put myself in that shoes. I think I wouldn't still be doing it. I would have just thought this isn't going to work, But he obviously didn't forecast that it was going to take him 21 months. His first client was Nike. He did all right, and they're obviously doing great since then. But it's just an incredibly hard thing to do. And I found with my own journey with Six Sales, I even though I knew I had to be overly cautious because I'm quite a positive person, so I always think things are going to be better, I still massively underestimated how long it would take to get to where I thought we would get, and then it grew really quickly, and now it's kind of like in this little growth spurt, and I couldn't. There's no way looking forward I could have seen that, like without the crystal ball that you mentioned that none of us have got, and then if you throw in, and then so you take that out, and then you throw in the factor that you're actually pitching to the CEO of a company that might want to hire you or not, so you've got to then kind of think about how you fit into that conversation. Incredibly difficult.
Yeah. I say it takes 21 months, but if you believe in the product or the service, you're gonna hit some brick walls every once in a while. So you've got to have the courage or convictions. And again, for me, it's like, is it a good product? Is it a good service? Does it fix a need that I think the market is requiring? Otherwise, you're just you're doing a job for the sake of doing a job, and that's
service looking for a problem.
Yeah, and that's no fun for anyone. I mean, you're in 6 months' time, you're going to be, why am I doing this? Your heart's not in it. You're trying to sell. Maybe you're trying to recruit people, and like, do I really want to bring them into this because I know that it's not really working? It's just going to pay or whatever it may be. So you've got to understand that it fixes a problem. And again, when I look at particularly in the type of ad tech space, I'd say every company I work for I've joined because I think it's fixing something. I think it's a progressive piece of technology, progressive service. It's going to help the publisher. It's going to help the brands and the advertisers. With the service that it provides. And again, if you're recruiting people, they've got to believe in you that you're going to be there to help them and grow the business. And you don't want to sell people short. It's their careers, it's their lives, and if it takes 21 months to grow a business, it takes 21 months. So you've got to keep people motivated to do that. You've got to see the type of the end game, or where it may be, or where the gaps are, and you as a team, how you fix it to get there. And that's part of the journey. And if you understand, I doubt he understood it's going to take him 21 months, but otherwise, he may have done a few things more differently or quickly, or whatever it may be, or pivoted faster in certain things. But as long as you believe in it, I think, then you can see the gap it's fixing, or how it's additive to some other part of the business, then I think you're going to be a good starting point.
Yeah. So you touched upon talent a couple of times there. That was going to be my last question, but I'm going to move it up the pecking order because we talked about it a little bit there. So obviously having the right talent is mission critical. So how do you think about hiring in the first instance, and then keeping motivation at the required level in order to keep that going, and then retaining that talent for the long term, assuming you want to retain them? Obviously sometimes you don't want to retain them, but how do you think about that? And then my last question, which might feed into that, is going to be around your first 90 days and what that looks like. But let's start with talent.
I think with talent, look, everyone turns up to get paid. That's the first thing. So I would, and again, I've had it in terms of, this is a salary, and then you get stitched up right at the end. And one company did that to me, and I started, but with a bit of a bitter taste, and that's no way for someone to start a job, and I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. So managing that expectation first off, and if you can exceed what they're looking for because you've got the budget for it, rather than thinking they've asked for 10, I'm just going to give them 10, even though I know they're really good. If I gave you 12, you're going to be super happy straight off. So you're going to go, oh my goodness, Bill, not me, the employer has given me 12 and I was only expecting 10. Now, obviously, they're on a probation, and they've got to prove themselves and so on and so forth. But we've definitely employed some people before where they've been more junior than people we were actually looking at, and some have come from the same company. And you've interviewed a suite of people, and actually the more junior person, who is a bit more hungry, or maybe just a bit more savvy on certain things, over and above the type of more experienced person you were perhaps originally looking for. And going back to our point on fitting the CV, you can go, okay, well, I've got a bit more budget, so let's get that person on board and make them happy before they've even started. So for me, if you can do that, then that's a great starting point.
I've been for jobs, that's just triggered something in my memory. I've been for jobs before. I was going for a senior role, and then the company decided, actually, we've decided to split it into 2 junior roles. And I'm wondering now, you just said that, if they saw someone really good that was junior and thought, well, if we get another one of them, that would be the way to go. Yeah.
But again, that can influence their strategy. But as a hiring manager, if you saw 2 super good people and you could get them for that budget, but you probably wouldn't be necessarily looking at, you would hire for someone at 10, you wouldn't be hiring people necessarily who are on the 5. You'd be, there'd be somewhere in between, or you can get the 2 5s that make the 10, then great, but you'll be speaking to different types of people, if that makes sense. So if you can do that first off, I think, where it needs to happen, I think that's super good. I do think, going back to the CV point, is actually physically looking at them and seeing where their experience is, or how it's type of evolved. Again, I don't know how the algorithms work, but people have done certain things in a different past, or they've maybe done something which, from a sporting level, you think, okay, they've actually got a really good team ethic because they've done this, and actually we're looking for a real team player. He might not have quite the experience, she may not have quite the right experience that we're looking for, but I can see that, I like that. And does that type of persona fit into the wider team that you're looking for? Is it a team, is it an individual contributor, or is it someone who's going to work at a project team? So, it's trying to make sure that you take that human touch to hiring. Whilst you don't have all the time to do it, I want to see as many people as possible, because a piece of paper is a piece of paper, and yes, you've got to get all your information down there. Everyone does CVs in a different way. Even my own CV is like, you had to do pages and pages and pages. Like, well, how relevant is some of this stuff? And then I was speaking, someone was going, well, Bill, the stuff you did back when you were, it's not even your CV, but when you were 13 and you started rowing and you were in a team there, and actually I was coxing because I was tiny, not the giant that I am now. The camera never lies. You know, I was actually coxing a team of 8 people, a crew of 8 people, and they were all 6 years older than me. And so for me, that type of started in my own mind, like that's type of where management type of started. That's type of making sure you're type of responsible, making sure that people understand that you're, you know, it's a real team. People don't understand rowing as a team sport. Some people just go up and down in a boat and that's it. But it is. I can bore anyone about that one if they want to talk about it. And so, you know, for me, that's something really interesting. And I'm not saying just because you've rowed, I'd hire you. That's not the case. But
shows something about your personality and your character.
Yeah, it does, and some of your background, and you know, teams are different people. You know, if you have all the same person, then you know the same persona, then it's not a very exciting team. And you know, from a commercial team, you want different mixes of people from different experiences, different walks of life. And as you're forming teams, you know, or changing teams, you've got to make sure you've got that. And so to go back to in terms of, you know, talent, it is, you know, training them, making sure that they feel they're getting, you know, their career can evolve, showing that path to you know, career growth. You know, worked for a few companies when there have been opportunities for them to go overseas within the same business. That's not great for me because I'm losing someone, but I know for them it's going to be a great experience. You know, there's a guy who used to work for me who's based up in Sweden, had a very nice life up in Sweden. Opportunity came up to go in Singapore. Youngish guy, you know, I just thought if I was his age, I'd be going straight off to Singapore. Didn't really know, you know, that the Far East marketplace, but savvy guy. You know, I just type of knew he'd have a good time over there from a professional perspective, obviously. And he'd grow his career and, you know, see where life takes you. You know, he hasn't looked back. He's still over there and having a great time. Didn't help me because I lost a really good person. But it, you know, from a business perspective and other people within our business looking at that, seeing they had the opportunities to go and do that, I think it made them all think, okay, well, this company is going to support us to do whatever we want to do within reason. Yeah. And so, you know, you've got to look after people. You know, the work-life balance is key and gets talked about a lot, but it's actually looking after people that they can have that work-life balance. And I know I haven't sometimes been the best at doing that myself. But, you know, it's become more and more important. I think, you know, post-COVID, people being at home, spending time with the family, getting that balance right, you know, doing more video calls than perhaps you used to, you know, insisting people go and see people. You know, people don't always want to go and see people. It takes time to get from A to B to go and get meetings in, so you can work more efficiently. And you've got to trust people to do that. But again, at the end of the day, numbers speak. If you're not hitting the numbers, you're not going to meetings, you're not being productive, you'll get found out. So you're not necessarily, it might be the wrong job for you. That, you know, rather than they're just not working out because they haven't fit the bill, it's like still having a conversation with them saying, well, you know, perhaps this isn't for you. There might be another job within the company that's suitable for you, or, you know, you're just, you know, how can we help you to make this work, or is it actually something you want to do? So, you know, every person's different, and I think you've got to treat them, you know, respect them for what they want. If we use Manchester United as a case in point, Eric Cantona, again, probably people who listen to this won't know who Eric Cantona was, you know, mercurial, amazing talent. Alex Ferguson just basically let him do what he wants to do. But he actually did his extra training. He really looked after the youth. You know, he spent extra time with them. But from the outside, he looks like some arrogant Frenchman who, you know, is only interested in himself, you know, absolute peacock. But actually, he was managed in exactly the right way, apart from maybe kicking, you know, someone in Crystal Palace. But that's frowned upon. Sorry?
That's frowned upon.
That's frowned. I believe it is. Yeah, kicking people in the crowd. But you know, the management of him was very different to how he managed other people, and yet, you know, built a spectacular team of complete individuals, but moulded around what he's looking for. Yeah. And that's the same in work. You know, you've got different people and they've got different talents, and you need to manage them in different ways.
Yeah. Some people will tell you that you should treat everyone the same, but actually it's not true, is it? As you've just pointed out there, it's treat everyone fairly, but people need treating.
Well, I've got 4 children, so they all need different levels of treatment.
Yeah, oh my goodness, that's a whole other podcast.
In a good way, levels of treatment.
Yeah, for sure. Listen, Bill, we're out of time.
Okay.
That's flown by. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. As I said before, Bill is open for business. So should you need anyone from a consulting or a full-time point of view and you think Bill might be your man, give him a shout or give me a shout if you know me, and I'll be very happy to make an introduction even. Easy for me to say. Bill, thanks for being on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.